Okay, hello there and welcome. Matt Petrowski here, and in this video, if you're interested in learning about FileMaker, we are going to be learning about FileMaker's calculation engine. And that's exactly what we're going to get into. Let's head over to my desktop and we will start with all that good stuff as the music winds down here. All right, you're here to learn more about FileMaker Pro, or you're just learning FileMaker Pro for the first time, and you want to know, I can't just tell you, here's how you solve your problem, because your problems in your FileMaker database are relative to what you're trying to build. But I can give you everything I can with regards to understanding how FileMaker works so that you can apply that knowledge. And that's what we're going to look at today. All right, we are going to move over to FileMaker here. And if you're going to follow along, I want to make this as easy as possible. I'm using a copy of FileMaker 16. And we are going to choose this option right here. Actually, I'm going to choose this one, Get Started. And I'm going to use one of the solutions that FileMaker provides so that you can follow along if you like to follow along. I know some of you do. Some of you like to just start with your own file, and that's no problem as well for this particular video, because we are going to be taking a look at FileMaker's calculation engine. Now, when I mention FileMaker's calculation engine, or when I think of FileMaker as a developer who's been working with FileMaker for a long time, I think of FileMaker only in two primary aspects. It is one, just a massive calculation engine, and it does all of its calculations based on context, and we'll explain that a little bit here in this video, and I have other videos that also discuss that. And then number two, it's just a giant automation engine, and it's an automation engine for everything that you see up in the menus, up in the top, and then in dialogues, and that's all through the scripts. Now, if you don't know that FileMaker's calculation its calculation engine is so heavily embedded, probably the only exposure that you'll maybe get is in the defined database. Now, what I did is I'm going to be using keyboard shortcuts in order to get in and out of these most frequent areas. If you haven't watched my previous videos, please go back and do that, where I actually go through and talk about all of these different areas or aspects. Defined database, or the managed database, is the area that I'm going to be going in and out of, and I'm doing that with Command-Shift-D. So if you see this dialog pop up on the screen, you're wondering, how did I actually get to that? That's how I did it. All right. So the first exposure that we have to FileMaker with regards to the calculation is quite obviously when we're creating a calculation. I'm not going to treat you like, okay, here's a text field, here's a number field, here's how you do it. You create a number field by entering the text here, or switching to number and clicking. You get fields. Hopefully you understand fields. But FileMaker's calculation engine is so pervasive that in this video, we're going to go through all of the different places that you can find this, but understanding why, because it's in all of these different places, what you can do. And here's the big takeaway for this video. And at the end of this video, you will probably be able to get this. There are really only three places in FileMaker that you can put data. And if you're thinking, okay, I know about the one place that I can put data, and that is in a regular text field, or a number field, or a timestamp, date, what have you, that's the first and the most obvious place that you can put data. But there's another place that you can put data. It's in memory. And in memory, in FileMaker, FileMaker has these things called variables. I mean, variables is a very common term for all of programming, and you find them in pretty much every language. FileMaker has them, but it treats them a little bit differently than other programming environments. And I'm just looking over at my other monitor when I glance over here every once in a while. So before we get into all these places where the calculation engine exists, let's take a look at these things called global variables. And the E are variables, I'm going to call them right now. We'll distinguish between the two. And you really need to learn this at the beginning, not towards the middle or the later end of your FileMaker development career. I'm going to go into the Manage Scripts actually temporarily, right there in Manage Scripts, and bring that up. I'm just going to create a new script. You can do the same thing, click the plus, and it can be a new blank script. I'm just going to call mine blank, and we'll zoom in so that we can see what we're doing here. All right, FileMaker has a script step called set variable. So I just started to type SET and VAR, and FileMaker dwindles the list down to set variable. Now, this is the one place that we can put things, and it's this is the one script step where we can put these values that I'm talking about. Remember I said to you there's 3 places you can store it. The first place is in a field. That's your permanent storage for data, and I think that one is obvious. The next place that you can put things are in temporary variables, and we're going to call them temporary because they are these, actually didn't mean to zoom out, right here, prefixed by a $sign. And then the third place that you can put variables is with a double $sign. Now, all you have to really think about is if fields store data and it persists for the lifetime of a file or until it gets deleted, global variables will store data and persist for the lifetime of while FileMaker is open, and unless you destroy them, just like FileMaker, just like your fields, unless you delete the data out of the fields. The single $sign variables are the place where you store temporary data. That's just while a script is running. So the reason that we want to know about variables, and you may be asking yourself right now, Matt, you said we're talking about the calculation engine. Where and how does this factor into the calculation engine? Well, as we're going to see in an upcoming video, and a little bit in this video, you really have to distinguish in FileMaker and make the separation of the data that I store doesn't necessarily always have to be something that I store. There are certain pieces of information you will store, but sometimes you don't need to store it. And here's the example that we're going to be going through today. I'm going to put in here a double $sign of full name. Well, I'm going to put the double $sign and then I'm going to call this global variable, and it's a global variable by indication of the double $sign. We're going to call it full name. Now, currently, we don't have to put a value in this if we didn't want to, but essentially, it would be a first name field and a last name field. So let's go get that really quickly. We have this specify over here, and anytime that we see specify in all of the scripting engine and FileMaker's calculation engine, everywhere else where we're going to see it, which is in a bunch of different places, we have access to the calculation engine. So when I click specify in this database, if you're following along, we already have a first name and a last name. So I'm going to double click on first name, and then I'm going to use FileMaker's concatenation operator. That's this little symbol right here, where I'm going to concatenate a space. And I've got a wonderful video coming up about basically telling you not to do this particular method of concatenating things. But what I've done is I've made the first name join with the last name. Super simple. And that is the only step in this particular script. Now, the great thing about with your scripts and when you're working in FileMaker, you can always test and run your scripts with these 2 buttons right here when you're working in the scripts. We can run this without actually seeing what's going to happen. And if we have a copy of FileMaker Advanced, we can actually click the little debug and actually see what's happening. Although in this script, there's not a whole lot to see because we only have 1 step. But we are setting this data into which location of the 3 that we have available? Is it going into a field? No. Is it going into a local variable? That's a single $sign. No. Are we setting it into a global variable? Yes, we are. So when we run this, the only place we can see this, because we really didn't see anything, and in this case it's really going to be sort of lame, so let's change this really quickly. I need to change and put in a first name and a last name. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to go over and click that run button again. So now that it's run, really the only place where this exists now is in that temporary data space. And the only way we can see this really is with a copy of FileMaker or Advanced. Or if you don't have a copy of FileMaker Advanced, we can put it right onto the layout. So I'm going to go to the data viewer. If you have a copy of FileMaker Advanced, then you're going to have the data viewer, and the data viewer will have this area called current, and we can see right here what happens is full name now exists. That's with a combination of my first name and my last name. Super simple. So here is the lesson that we're learning today. Why did I go through the process of showing you this global variable and trying to help you make the distinction between when do I want to display data versus when do I want to store data? Because I'm probably okay in assuming that the same thing was done in a FileMaker calculation field. We can see that if we go into Define Database, and I can see right here, when we zoom in this context database, we have a first name and we have a last name. Now, those are the two distinct pieces of data that we're wanting to store. But we have also made a combination of those two pieces of data by actually creating this field of name. Now, the question I ask at this point in time is, really, if the only thing that we want to see on screen is the first name, the combination of the first name and last name, do we really need to actually create this field? Because in all of FileMaker, what's going to end up happening is you are going to add more stuff, and then you're going to add more stuff, and then you're going to add more stuff and more stuff and more stuff and more stuff, and I promise you, your FileMaker database will grow and grow and grow and grow, and unless part of your development process is, well, am I using this anymore? I need to actually remove it out. It takes you time to stop and determine from the maintenance standpoint what you actually want to take out. So FileMaker ends up growing and growing and growing into this giant ball of all kinds of stuff, and it becomes hard to manage. So from the very beginning, if you can decide when do I want to add something versus when do I not need to add something, that's a really good question to ask and answer. So we have a field right here that we added to our table. We added it for the purpose of having something really nice to display. Now here's the key with calculation fields and the calculation engine and what we're looking at here. In this situation, this field of name, and it should be, let's make it a little bit easier. I'm going to call it full name because I don't like that it's not super obvious. Oops, we got a bad zoom there. So this full name field, because it's part of the actual record data, no matter what, whenever the first name and the last name or either or is changed, this value changes and it always continues with FileMaker. It persists. That's different than this item right here that we have created this variable of the full name. Meaning if I'm on my record right now on this Matt Petrowski record, and if I create a new record by clicking New Record, and I put in Bill Jones, here's the distinction. The calculation engine with that calculated field, and let's put it on the layout. Go into layout mode on this file, and we will just, there's many ways you can put a field. You can click up here and get this little thing. You can drag it out to the layout. You can use the field picker with Command or Control K, and you can drag it, select it here, and drag it out. Or my favorite is always just to take a field that exists and duplicate. The snafu with that is you always need to remember that the field comes with a lot of extras, such as quick find being turned on, maybe a placeholder that actually shows, what you should put in the field when it's empty, tooltips, anything that's associated to the field actually comes along with it. But in this case, I'm okay. So again, here is our learning lesson. We have, in this situation, Jones Bill is coming along with this record. When I switch to the other record, which I'm doing with the Control up arrow or Control down arrow to cycle through records, we can see that it actually goes with the actual record, which is probably what you want. But we can see right here that this value, because it does not change, we would have to do something different in order to take advantage of the situation of being able to keep this full name value here, but yet display it on the layout and change on a record by record basis. So let's put this value, this global field, or this global variable, onto the layout. That's really easy to do. We go here, and we can actually just use any piece of text. You can use the text tool that's right here, and you can select that, and then you can click anywhere on the layout. And I'm going to type a little bit because I know it's going to be really narrow there. And we'll put this so we can see it. But anything that you want to show on a layout, you can do that with a merge variable. And a merge variable simply just, it's the same thing as what it looks like within Microsoft Word or many other solutions. It's just I want to merge something in here. Now I could put a field itself. In fact, FileMaker has a menu command under the Insert menu. of merge field. So in the insert menu, you're going to find that merge field, but we also have this one, merge variable. So with this text selected, if we select merge variable, what we're going to see is FileMaker is simply just going to put in that double $sign, and then all we have to do is reference what value we would want, full name. All right, now stick with me on this if you're feeling a little confused about all of this stuff that I'm doing. We'll save the layout changes. So we can see here I'm on my layout right now, or I'm on my record. I switched to it with the command up arrow. And Matt Petrowski is actually showing on the layout. So what happens is I didn't need, this is not coming from a field, this is coming from that one of those three places. It's a temporary space, but the one that persists as long as I'm using FileMaker. So if in my database, for some reason, I wanted to get rid of this, and trust me, there's a reason that you don't want to have a lot of unstored calculated fields. In this database, this is not an unstored calculated field, it's actually stored. And we'll get into that in another video talking about the indexing and what the impacts are. But the point of this lesson is, in order for me to create this, at any point in time, I can do it using FileMaker's calculation engine. So after 15 minutes of talking about, here's a variable, and here, let's go into the scripts, and let's go into the defined database and do all of this. My whole point in telling you all of this in order to get to the calculation engine is the fact that FileMaker's calculation engine, which the calculation that you're wanting is just the combination of these two values, the first name and the last name. Because you want to combine them, my whole point is you don't always have to create a field. In order to display something in FileMaker, it does not require a field because you can actually make things happen within the user interface. So let's play with this a little bit. Let's find an area where FileMaker has the calculation engine. All right, we're going to go into layout mode. And FileMaker's calculation engine is in so many places that it's incredible. FileMaker, again, I think of it as a giant calculation engine. So what we had done is we explicitly made a script that does something very explicit. It sets a variable. But that's not the only way that you can set a variable. In fact, in an upcoming video, we're going to be taking a look at the very first FileMaker function that I think any newer FileMaker developer or user should use, and that is the let function. The let function is very special because it allows you to change these particular values. And it's the one function that allows you to do that anywhere where the FileMaker calculation engine exists. So let's look at this actual text block right here, and let's see how many other places we can find FileMaker's calculation engine. Well, I'm going to show the inspector. You can do that with Command or Control I, and I'm going to switch to the fourth area of that in this Data tab. And FileMaker has this really nice little behavior. Let's move the window so that we can see it side by side, and I'll shrink that one up and we'll put it right next to it. So FileMaker has this really cool feature where you can hide things. Look at this, hide object when. So anytime that we see this little pencil indicator, that means we have access to FileMaker's calculation engine. So if we click this, up comes our familiar FileMaker calculation dialog box. Let's find another place. I'm going to right-click on this text field, and I'm going to choose FileMaker's conditional formatting option. If you're used to Excel or anything else, this option right here allows you to format or change the formatting based on a condition. If the condition was that the name field contains the word Matt, and I want that text to become red or green, this is where you're going to do it. Well, we select that option. We get a new dialog, but we click this Add button, and we switch this option right here from value is to where FileMaker is making it easy for us. The value is equal to Matt, or not between, or greater than. If we choose the option of formula is, and we scroll over, lo and behold, we get access to the specify calculation dialog. And there it is, FileMaker's calculation dialog box. So that's number 2. That's the second time that we have access just on this object alone to access FileMaker's calculation dialog box. Let's find another one. Let's go to the first area, the Position tab, and let's look at the tooltip. There's that little pencil mark. Okay, so while this object is selected, I could have hidden it, I could apply conditional formatting, and I can actually add a tooltip. Click on the box, and there it is again. It's FileMaker's calculation dialog box. Let's find another way where this object is affected by the calculation dialog box. We'll click on the fourth area again. We'll expose the field, and we will look at, well, this really only applies to fields, but it is the fourth area for fields. Let's scroll in for that. There it is again, the little pencil mark. So this is pretty cool. If you think about this now, if the calculation engine allows me to combine my fields and do computation using math and using the other functions, and if you've watched my previous videos in this series, to actually use my own custom functions, if all of these things are simply just combinations of whatever I want to display within the user interface, and I can use FileMaker's calculation engine because it's exposed in all of these different ways, you get to ask yourself, do I really need that calculated field? And I'm going to show you right now which one I'm going to use. This is one of my most favorite tricks, but I'm going to choose to use the fourth option of hide object when. So I'm going to use the first one that we looked at out of the 4 that we've seen so far where the calculation engine is exposed. Hide this object when. Now, do I want to actually hide this full name value? No, I don't really want to hide it. I just want to use it for the purpose of display. But it's the calculation engine. So that means I can calculate the value of first name and full name, or first name and last name. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to click right here, and in this calculation, I'm going to actually create something. Some developers might consider this an advanced technique, but for a new developer, I would much rather give you this information now because it allows you to avoid some of the mistakes, such as the monster growth that you get throughout FileMaker. So this function called let, in fact, we'll go over here and we'll type in let, and we'll just double click to bring it into the calculation engine. And it looks confusing. You look at this and you say, I'm brand new to FileMaker. I don't understand what is all of these characters. What's var equals expression? I don't know what an expression. Oh, an expression is just any FileMaker calculation, like 1 + 1 is an expression. Or first name combined. Are you going to add in there? I guess it's not going to add in there for some reason. I will type it. First is concatenated to a space, which is concatenated to a last name. That's just the expression. So let's get rid of all of the gobbledygook and just make it really easy and show what we can actually do. Well, can we change or control the value that's in that variable, that one of 3 spaces where we can store something? Can we change that to actually have the combination of the first name concatenated to the last name? Well, sure we can. So in this situation, what happens is we have to remember we're in this field or this inspector attribute of hide calculation. Now we can see it down here at the bottom. Anytime we're working within FileMaker's calculation, I don't know that my head may be blocking that. Whenever we're looking at the calculation box, we want to look at the bottom and see what does this particular thing actually expect. Well, in this case, the hide calculation expects a Boolean. So this value that's called a Boolean, it's just a true or false, a 1 or 0, which basically makes sense. Do I want to hide it or do I not want to hide it? That's what this calculation expects, and FileMaker's calculation box is telling me that. But guess what? I'm using this calculation in sort of a little devious way, purposely saying, you know what? I know I can set this temporary value, which is temporary while FileMaker is actually running with this file is open, is temporarily setting this value of full name to exactly what I have normally in a field. But if I want to avoid having that field, I'm going to set it into this little temporary value, and then I have to answer this question. The calculation result must be a Boolean. The question is still, do you want to hide this thing that you have selected, yes or no? Well, my answer is no, I don't want to hide this. So with the let function, it actually works like this. Let, and then you can have a variable. We'll go through the let function in a video tomorrow, actually. You can have many different things within the let function, but for now we're going to say a variable. We can say let a variable be equal to something, or it can be anything, and then you have to have a result. So what's the result? In this case, the result that we're looking at is that Boolean. Do you want to hide, yes or no? False. I don't want to hide this. So what's going to happen is the calculation on this object is saying, okay, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set whatever variable you have equal to whatever you want to calculate, a la the calculation engine, meaning you can access anything. And do you want to hide, by the way? No, I don't. And so what I'm doing here is I'm taking advantage of FileMaker's calculation engine, knowing that I don't want to have this field in my database. So now let's watch what happens. This is the magic that is FileMaker's calculation engine. We'll put I'm taking them out of this area called the top navigation, and I'm putting them down here underneath the field. And let's see what happens on a record by record basis as we move through this record. So I want to save my changes automatically, and I'll save it. All right, so here's the true test. We just learned that this field data, which accidentally has that's the problem that you get when you option drag. I took a value list with it. This particular field is being calculated on the fly as I move from record to record, but it's a stored field that's part of the structure of my database. This text box is using a merge variable, merging directly onto the layout, that when I move from one record to the next, FileMaker has to ask a lot of questions. And one of the questions it asks about all of the things on the layout is, do these things need to hide, yes or no? And when it gets to that point, it says, oh, I found this calculation that's saying that this particular text block does not need to hide. It's saying false. It doesn't want to hide, but it's also asking me to do something. It's asking me to update this global variable, and the global variable is going to work for the purpose of display. Look what just happened. I just did a command down arrow and I switched to this new record. And what I got on screen was I got the display value that I'm trying to achieve without having had to create the field. So this is the fundamental lesson. This is, as a new FileMaker learner, this is the key thing, that if you can walk away from this one notion of, even if I don't know how to do it, because Matt showed me that it can be done here, I get to ask the question, do I need to add this field? And the question preceding that is this a display-only value, or is this truly data that I want to store? If it's data that you know you need to store, then you're of course going to create fields. If it's data that you just want for the purpose of display, then you get to answer that question of, if I just want to display this, do I actually need to create a field, or do I just need to figure out a way where I can display it on screen? And this is just one of a few ways that you can actually display this and avoid having to create that extra field. And a lot of FileMaker database systems, if you go through and look at all of their different fields, I have seen FileMaker systems where this one's actually pretty clean, because what I can see is right off the bat, I can select and I can see a lot of text fields. You're storing data. That's actually relevant to the solution. But I've seen FileMaker solutions where there is an inordinate number of calculation fields. And then the worst case is when all of these when calculations do not say index and instead say unstored, I guarantee that you've got a solution, a FileMaker solution, that's running slower than it could otherwise run, because these unstored calculated fields really impact your performance. It's one of the number one things that makes a FileMaker solution much slower and slower. When all the wanting to be achieved is to display something on the screen. And so that's our learning lesson for today. We're right at the 30-minute mark, and I don't like to make these YouTube videos longer than 40 minutes because it's a lot to take in, a lot to learn. We could make YouTube videos for 5 years straight, and there's so much to learn in FileMaker. So that is our lesson about the calculation engine. And my challenge to you for this lesson is just recognize, as you're working through FileMaker, how many different places the calculation engine comes up. It's everywhere. And knowing this now, you can basically set and control these variables at any time using the let function. And we're going to get into the let function in our video tomorrow and taking a deeper dive into that as the first function that I think everybody should learn. So let's see if we've got any questions that came in through the chat, because this is something that I do here live. All right. Doesn't the Mac version look different from Windows Edition? Yes, they do. Mac and Windows do look a little bit different, but they work exactly the same. FileMaker has feature parity. Which alternative concatenation method do you recommend? The layout merge field approach. Gjermund, you'll have to actually clarify that question a little bit more with regards to the layout merge field approach. The one that I just showed with the global variable is one that I like to use a lot. I didn't show you that you can actually use a local variable because that one can get a little bit sketchy sometimes, whereas the global variable tends to always show. But that variable that we used, switching back to the desktop there, that we used on the layout, this variable, if I had wanted to, for the purpose of display, FileMaker will display what they call a local variable. So if you don't know how to distinguish between them, a single $sign is local variable, a double $sign is a global variable. And remember, those are the two other places we can store a piece of data. That's the one that I prefer to use. All right, back to the questions. Did we get any more? HBH group, okay, but can you ever slow a file's performance with too many global variables or merge variables? You know, that's an excellent question, and I've got a wonderful answer for you. Think about this. We're really not impacted by performance too much with regards to hard drives, because more and more we're moving away from spinning hard drives to our solid-state drives. But independent of the drive, what happens is on a drive, as it's spinning, the seek head has to wait till it gets around and we actually find stuff. Now with our solid state drives, all of the data in that can just be really pulled out because it's all electronic based on, I think it's based on the static that's in the drive or something. I don't know. I'm not a drive expert. But all of these global variables and merge variables are all stored within memory. Now, the question is, will it affect a file's performance with too many global variables or these merge variables? And the answer is, in most all likelihood, you would be hard-pressed to ever completely overwhelm FileMaker with the number of global variables that you create. Now, the number one thing is a lot of developers, or not a lot, I don't know how many do or don't, this area within FileMaker, this data viewer right here, when you're looking at a particular file, what happens is you can end up with an accumulation of a lot of global variables if you take this approach. And for some odd reason, some developers, they say that they don't like to clutter up this area. But I promise you, this global variable with this value of Bill Jones right here, in the world that is data, that is nothing but a speck of sand, probably on all of the beaches in all of the United States and probably all of Europe. It is absolutely minuscule in terms of the amount of memory that our current computers have. My computer currently has 24 gigs, I think, and what's the current number that we're entering into is 16, and the iPhones are coming with who knows how much memory they've got on the iPhones for FileMaker. Long story short, you will not overwhelm FileMaker. And no, in fact, it will improve performance, especially if you replace a lot of unstored calculations with these display methods in order to display data. Again, the answer being if it's for display only, then it's much better to stick it in memory because memory will be really quick, whereas FileMaker actually having to do the calculation, and there's a little bit of go-between when the FileMaker file is hosted with FileMaker Server, where FileMaker Server will it will do some of the calculations, and then some of it'll transfer the data, and then the client will do the calculations. FileMaker determines when it's going to do all of that. But the key is, if it's stored in memory, and it's been done on the actual local machine, that's where it's the quickest to get to because there's no round trip where FileMaker doesn't have to go back and forth to FileMaker Server. Now, I will grant you that with a little bit of experience, that's when you come to the point of, should I actually make this a calculated field or should I use some type of display mechanism like a global variable? That comes with experience, but overall, my whole point with this lesson is recognize that the calculation engine itself, and the reason that I chose to use this global variable was the fact that the calculation engine will oftentimes give you the result that you need without having to create fields. That's the whole point of this lesson, because one of the things that newer FileMaker developers do is they just throw in fields, throw in fields, throw in fields, because that's all they know. That's what they've been taught to do. Oh, you need a new calculation, add a new calculation. You need a new relationship, add that too. And a FileMaker database grows into a monster bowl of spaghetti, and it becomes harder and harder to actually break down and understand your own solution. So I'm trying to help the newer FileMaker developers from doing that. Let's see if we had any more questions before we wrap this up. Looks like no more questions came in for right now. So I know we're on a little bit of a delay, but I'm pretty sure you guys have had time to ask those questions. If you are watching this after the recording of this real time, feel free, please put your comments down below if you have your own methods or techniques where you have done anything in FileMaker with regards to distinguishing between display and your data, then put those in the comments. Help other people out. Ask me questions, whatever you want. Otherwise, I think that's going to give this video a wrap. We're a nice tight 37 minutes here, I think, as of now. And without the questions, we're going to wrap this up. All right. So, if you are interested in more about actually being notified, go ahead and click the subscribe. That's for YouTube subscribe. And then over here, you will find the next video in the series. If you're interested in being notified via me directly, you can go to FileMakerMagazine.com and sign up there as well. All right, I hope this helped you out with FileMaker. Much luck and happy FileMaking. Till next time, see you later.